Dankeschön.
So I wanted to start by noting that your career strikes me for a number of different reasons, but one of them is the sheer variety of different types of characters you've played. Do you think that your multilingual background and ability has helped you avoid any typecasting?
I would say yes, yeah. I was really born into a very mixed up family with a Spanish mom and a German father, and then also French family, and we all lived together in the beautiful city of Cologne. It's not that beautiful, but it was very inspiring because there was that clash of cultures, and then that always when I realized that I really want to become an actor, it influenced me in wanting to break the boundaries and not be limited to just one market or film culture, as in Germany. And then step by step I managed to get the opportunities to get out of it. It was with Goodbye Lenin, actually, which became a successful film in many places. So all of a sudden I got calls from France or from Spain. And that was really a wonderful moment that I always dreamed of. And then by its nature, there were parts that were very diverse, because I was allowed to play, for example, a famous anarchist in Spain, a real character who was one of the last victims of Franco and killed in 1974. So that was a very rich experience for me. And then, obviously parts that I wouldn't have been offered in Germany. And also, there's a certain kind of German cinema that I never wanted to do, and I intend to keep it like that. And that's the wonderful German comedies, which is a paradox in itself. No, it's just like if you I grew up in Cologne. If you go to Belgium, which is 30 minutes away, they wouldn't get the jokes because they're simply not funny. So, but some of these films are incredibly successful in Germany. So of course there were these offers at the beginning, and would have been easy to take this route, and then instead I tried not to. And sometimes also that means, you do films that don't work, because I sometimes chose some risky ones, and then, which, some of them may be considered to be a failure. But not for me. It was part of the plan.
So what is it that draws you to a character? Is it someone that you identify with, or someone that you see as completely different from yourself? What makes you say yes to taking any specific role?
Mostly it happens. It's always a good feeling when it happens quickly, when you read a script for the first time and you cannot, put it away. But you have to read it through in one go, and then you feel that there's something, and then it doesn't matter that much, what kind of genre it is, because I'm interested in most of the genres. How big or small the part is, how big or small the film is. It just makes a strange click in you, and you're just curious. And then also, is the character very far away from you, or is he someone you know pretty well? Think so I'm pretty open, and I just the script ultimately is my Bible, and then the next step is who is making it, and is the director interesting, and so on, who else is in it, and so forth. But it's really about the script, and then and there are many bad scripts also, or they're great scripts, but you can feel that you cannot get there. I also had this a couple of times when you think the weight is too heavy, or it just doesn't match, which sometimes is sad, because then I'm when the movie comes out and I think, oh shit, it's a really great movie, but there's so far I always thought no, but he was better than, he was the right choice, not better, but better or worse, but so it's also a lot to do with an intuition that you have.
So who's the hardest part that you've ever had to play?
Pretty early on, before I made Goodbye Lenin, I made a film called The White Noise with an Austrian director, quite a crazy guy, with whom I did another film called The Educators, which then was in Cannes in competition. There hadn't been a German film in competition for ages, so thank God we went there. But the first film was very experimental, and I was playing a schizophrenic, and that was very demanding because I prepared myself spending time with a man who suffered from the disease, and the film was pretty much based on his life. And ultimately, for me, the challenge was to get as close as I possibly can. But it's such an complex and complex disease that you cannot possibly understand and feel when you are healthy. And so I remember that we even had some scenes that fortunately got deleted from the movie because we shot some scenes together. And then I really felt like a clown. I felt like an actor. I just thought it felt so wrong. But then in the process, and the director, the crazy one, helped me with that, is I started exploring my own insanity, and push it as far as I can possibly do. And I tested it in daily life in Cologne, in the streets. So I started talking to people and talking to myself and doing things like that. And it was remarkable to see how quickly society would consider you crazy. So I was doing it in the tram and standing very close to people. Well, it is quite crazy, I admit. But sometimes I did more harmless things, but people, immediately think like, oh. And so that was a tough one, but it turned out to be a film that is still shown and used in psychiatries and in universities for psychology students. And I'm married now to a psychologist, and when we met, she said, "Oh God, I know who you are." Because she had seen it, I thought, "Oh God." So that was quite funny. But again, I heard today that Goodbye Lenin is also shown as to students still up until now in many countries, for students who learn German or history or whatever. And so that is always a huge compliment for a film, if that is used to educate. So I'm very fond of this film, and that might have been one of the toughest experience.
So in playing someone like Lucas or a villain, do you ever get worried about going into yourself and exploring that side of yourself? Or do you relish that kind of vulnerability?
It doesn't worry me too much. I'm not that method kind of guy, so I always need to switch it on and off. I find it very stressful to be a method actor. And you have to be really good, like Daniel Day-Lewis or I don't know, because otherwise it just annoys everyone. And it's also very it must be very exhausting. I mean, if you come out with a result like Daniel Day-Lewis, then this is incredible. But I could not do that. So I sometimes I chose to play some characters as a German. Very often, sooner or later, it happens that you have to wear the uniform. So some of these characters that you don't have to have empathy with, I didn't, So it's as long as there's something that interests you in them, you don't have to like them, and it doesn't bother me. I don't fall. Some actors say that after a long shoot or a play or whatever, that they fall into this hole, and then they don't know who they are, and so hard to get out of the part. I personally never had that.
So then with The White Noise, with Rush, and with The Fifth Estate, when you're playing a character whom there's someone in real life it's based on, is that harder to play that character? Does it feel as it restricts you, or is it an easier guide to go off?
It's you feel a different responsibility and a different pressure. So you just want to get it right. That is definitely true. And then it depends. I mean, sometimes it can be easier if someone's dead. You feel more freedom in portraying him. Sometimes it can be a bit restrictive when somebody's still around. And I just talked to some of you guys upstairs about my experience with Niki Lauda. He's just the most honest man. He would tell you the truth in your face. There's nothing like diplomacy, charm, kindness. It doesn't exist. And then he's Austrian, I'm German, so they don't like us that much, and vice versa. So when they found out that I play their icon, their national hero, I heard a lot of noise in my ear when I spent the first couple of days in Vienna. I said, oh, he's going to play Niki Lauda. It was like, so I felt this weight, and then I just wanted to be liked by this man, and I just was hoping that he would, open up, and then eventually he did. But just to give you an idea, our first conversation was because he knew that I wanted to meet him, but I didn't want to call him and to annoy him because he's a busy man. I doesn't want to meet anyone. He says he doesn't have any friends and blah blah. So one day, finally, I saw +43. That's Austria, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I picked up the phone and he said, "Yeah, all right, Niki, I guess we have to meet now." I said, "That'd be great. Okay, well, come to Vienna, but one thing, just bring hand luggage. In case we don't like each other, you can piss off right away." I said, "Oh, bye." I said, "Okay." So that's how he is. And then fortunately, I had to buy some stuff in Vienna, so I really took just the hand luggage, and then I extended my stay, and he really opened up, and he really understood how much I want to play this part and how much I want to get it right. And so we spent a lot of time together, and that's a fascinating process because when I read this script, I wanted to play this part so much. I think it was brilliantly written by Peter Morgan, who's a genius, the guy behind The Crown, and he's a real expert, and Frost Nixon when it comes to biopics or real characters. He's amazing. And so but I felt like I'm not like this man at all. I mean, I like cars, but I thought like, wow. So it was crucial to spend time with a man, and when you then have that feeling that you become this guy for 3 months, and you become quite a heroic and interesting guy. That's a beautiful experience for us when you feel that you are at ease and that you lose the restraints, and it just makes that click, and then you get the accent right, and then one thing comes to the next, and you lose that pressure on your back. That's a beautiful relief and a beautiful feeling.
Does it add kind of emotional weight? So I was thinking specifically about when you filmed the crash at the Nürburgring. Did it add a different sense of the experience knowing him so personally?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, especially having him there, because he came that day and explained everything how it was. It's very weird. I mean, you get goosebumps, and then you feel you feel a huge authenticity. Also, the way the film was shot and made. We also had some extras some of them were real guys from back in the days who were there, and so the feeling of making that film was it felt real. It felt very authentic, and thank God also the Formula One drivers who saw the film got that. They said there's so many bad, race films and car and films about this sport, and somebody like Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel and Nico Rosberg, when they met me, said like, "Congrats, that was convincing," and so that makes you feel very good.
Was that the most proud you've ever felt of a film?
It's one of the films which made me the proudest, yeah. And maybe, just get a compliment from an Austrian. It's really quite something, being German, I have to say.
And then I wondered, what was the most emotional scene you've ever had to shoot? A film that I mentioned before, the Spanish film.
this young guy I played was called Salvador Puchantik, and he was one of the last victims to be killed in this most horrible medieval way with the garrote vil, which is like a screw, you know, where they just break your neck in the most brutal kind of way. And that in 1974, you know, it goes back to the, I don't know, 15th century. So horrible. He was one of the last victims, if not the last. And then we shot this in a prison, which was an original prison. And then his sisters, who spent the last hours with him, who were present that day. So that again is a very intimidating feeling, which is hard to describe, because it transcends then. It's then no longer only a movie, it's just something else, and it is, you know, it happened, and you're playing this guy, and you feel also a bit almost guilty, and you feel sometimes a bit also not a pleasant feeling to be pretending that you do it, but you have to be, you know, it has to work, and so you have to get into the mood. But then seeing the real people, sometimes, but it's the choice of these people if they want to be present, and it's the choice of the director. If it was for me and I would direct, I would sometimes not allow certain people to come to these to set in certain moments. Nicky, two times he came to set, he's bored very quickly and easily, so he always left because he thought like, oh, I'm doing it again, oh, oof, I'm leaving. But these brief moments when he was there were really not good for me because I saw the real guy, and then I was like, it felt wrong.
So do you feel as though you need that kind of authenticity in a role, or is it easier in your mind to kind of play something so surreal and abstract that you don't have that immediate connection to?
Both can work depending on the project, depending on the part. I mean, I enjoy very much traveling in time because I'm very interested in history. So when I think of one of the last things I did was The Alienist. When a TV show has so much resources and money behind it to recreate, in this case, the late 19th century in perfection, it is one of the most wonderful feelings because you really, for some seconds, you're really traveling back in time when nothing is nowadays. When you're sitting in a carriage and you have these wide shots where you don't even see the camera, you don't see anyone from the crew, and everything you're surrounded by is 1896. It only works for a couple of seconds because then somebody comes in with a cloud, or you see a microphone or whatever. But and we all felt this, also Dakota Fanning and Luke Evans and I, you know, and that is beautiful because who can, you know, who has a time machine? So if in your job you get this time machine, it's great.
Are there any times specifically you'd like to do more than others?
Well, I like the 19th century. I like the 20s. You know. Yeah. And well, actually, I don't have any preference. But again, it's funny because I come from movies in which there was one funny thing, and I don't want to say who it was who made the film and what film it was, but coming from the background that I have, where movies didn't have that much money, it was very funny to see what's written in the script and what you see on set, you know. When you read, like, there's a castle and, you know, 1,000 extras and 500 horses and you know, costumes and all that, and you arrive on set and there's you know, half a cottage and a donkey and you know, 3 extras, and then you're supposed to recreate the magic of whatever, the 16th century, or it just doesn't work. So sometimes it's fun for that reason to do these big films. It's a bit like being in a Luna Park, or you know, just being, you know, feeling that luxury of you know, being able to absorb the time, the era, and that helps us in our acting so much, obviously. So in The Alienist, we're really able to move around 360, and it was always New York, parts of New York in 1896. There were shops, and although there were no moments or scenes in these shops, you could still go in and find props of, you know, looked a bit like here actually. That's great. So, but you need to have, you know, you need to have the budget to do these things.
So, with big budget films or franchises, like with the MCU or the Kingsman franchise, is it daunting jumping into an established franchise where you're kind of getting with already charted territory?
Yes, because it can be very risky. You know, you don't want to. These big films, you know, when they don't work, everybody knows about them, you know, and and if that's a failure, then it can hurt, you know. Also with, you know, when you're getting older, you lose fear. So I don't care so much anymore about bad reviews because I'm very hard on myself. Like Dakota Fanning called me negativus destructivus. I think it's a character of Asterix, I think, as a comic, because I'm you know, I'm never happy. So. Bad reviews cannot harm me that much anymore, but it was different when I started, you know, because, you know, it destroyed me. I thought, like, God, you know, why don't they like my acting? Why don't they like the film? And blah, blah. But still, you know, before you accept to do a big film, you know, you want to make sure that, you know, the people behind it have shown and proven that they can do it well. So with Marvel, in that universe, I was amazed by the quality, because it's entertaining on a very, very high level, and the mastermind behind it, Kevin Feige, is a very smart man, you know. And also, I wanted to do something very, very different, and I didn't hesitate at all. I met him here in London, actually, and he was. You know, even willing to change the part according to, you know, ideas that I had. I thought, like, wow, this is amazing. And being there was a wonderful experience as well, because I thought, like, oh God, I'm the new one in school, and I'm standing. The German's going to stand there in the corner, and nobody wants to play with him and talk to him because they all know each other from all these, you know, hundreds of films. But they were very welcoming and very supporting. It was a beautiful experience, and Kingsman as well. I start on Monday, so that's why I'm also here in England. I'm going to be here for a while, and it's a prequel of the Kingsman franchise. So goes back to the First World War. But I'm very careful now. There might be a Matthew Vaughn spy here in the room, because I'm always spoiling everything, and so I should better. Not talk too much.
Is it difficult working with such big characters? Or what's the relationship like on set with big established characters?
Well, you can tell they know each other. You can tell they have a certain power and expertise, and, you know, and they feel very comfortable in playing these parts, but they have played them a couple of times. So, but again, and that's also something that I experienced but also with British actors, and especially with Americans, that they're very enthusiastic if they, you know, get to know someone who's new, you know, and they want to give you that feeling of, you know, being safe, and, you know, and because there's many tricks and horrible things you can do as an actor, and when I grew up, I was told there's always these tales. I actually never met. Well, I met one who's also quite famous, but I cannot tell you who it is. Who was not very nice. It's, you know. And that's something that I never understood, because it's you have to cooperate. To make a scene good, it doesn't help you at all if you want to be better than the other one. So all these tricks, you know, trying to be bad when you're off camera, you know, giving a great you know, performance whilst you're on, and then some who disappear when the camera position changes, and they're not even there. So. Some of these people just leave, and then you have to do the scene with an assistant director. I mean, it's stuff like that. It's outrageous. Or some who all of a sudden forget their lines when they're off camera. or because it's always important that your eyes are very close to the camera. It just looks better. And then there's actors who then slowly move away while you're acting, you know. It's another lousy trick. So stuff like that, and it doesn't make any sense because, you know, ultimately you harm yourself because it makes the scene worse. And with these guys, for example, I experienced the opposite, you know. It's just like very, very supportive.
And then finally, before we open questions over to the audience, you've spoken before about how you think cinema can be used for social activism and political good. Do you think your career so far has kind of lent towards political films, or would you like to move more into those kind of films in the future?
Well, there's a couple of ones that I did. I was always drawn into. I would say that films with an importance, with a subject matter that matters, with a, you know, being politically or socially or whatever, always would be my, you know, main interest, and that's how I started. The first, you know, I would say 10 or 15 years. And then I wanted to, you know, use the opportunities that I got to do different things. But ultimately, that's where I come from. That's the way I was raised, and that's my own interest as a person and my own curiosity in life and in humans and in politics. And my big new adventure for this year and for the next year is that I'm gonna direct my first film, and it's already been written. It's based on an idea of mine, co-written with a famous Austrian playwright. We get along. And it is about, it's a very personal story. Again, I don't want to bore you to death. But it talks about the East-West clash in Berlin, and social differences, cultural differences, political differences, and all that. So, yeah, it's probably also the movies that I go and watch. These are the ones that probably interest me the most. But yeah.
All right, so on that note, let's jump over to the audience. If you want to put your hands up and wait for the microphone to get to you, and then stand up when you get the microphone. Yeah, let's go to the hand on the right-hand side.
Hi, thanks for coming. I just wanted to ask, out of all the locations that you filmed in, what would you say has been your favourite?
Favourite location?
I've not been many places, so.
That's a really good question. I mean, I have to say that Budapest is a wonderful city, so I don't mind going back there in April. I'll be there for another 7 months, and that's a long time because it's a series, like 2 or 3 films back to back, and I'd never been before, so I thought like, ooh, Budapest. But it is a very romantic, grand, beautiful city, which we all fell in love with. I once shot a film in Paris, which I absolutely loved, with great old stars, Jane Fonda and Gerald and Chaplin, and these kind of guys, and the combination of their anecdotes and Paris in summer was pretty magical. And Barcelona is my second home, and because I spent most of my time in Berlin, I'm always happy when I can work there. So I did 1 or 2 movies there, and it's always, it's a wonderful city. So yeah, these 3.
And then let's jump over to the hand in the back row.
Hallo, liebe Genossen. So, one of my favorite films is Goodbye Lenin, hence why I'm here. And in one of the scenes where you make the fake news report, to explain to your mother in the film why there are all these cars and all these people, you talk about these refugees from the West coming to the East because you have fascist parties and hard marketing capitalism just isn't working for people. Do you think that's quite true today, where we do have Brexit, we have Trump, we've had a decade in Britain of austerity for nothing. And it feels like that news report, because I watched the film a month ago, and just thinking about it, it's like, yeah, that's quite true. Maybe even I would have ran away to the east to escape all this horror, you know. So what do you think about what's going on in the world today?
It is, yeah, unfortunately, you're very right. That's the case. And it breaks my heart because I'm also a father now of a 2-year-old son who's fortunately too little to ask certain questions. But in my generation, I was so lucky because at the age of 11, the wall was torn down in Germany, and then the spirit of you know, opening up borders and mutual respect and curiosity and believing in that, you know, unity was really strong and there, you know, and very inspiring. And that's how I grew up. And I always took it for granted that this fundament is so strong that whatever happens, at least we have this because we share the same values, and we've gone through decades and centuries of chopping our heads off each other. That, you know, it was just time to, you know, grow back together and become a bit more reasonable. But in times of, you know, in times of crisis, it always gives you the perfect soil for easy messages, for populists and they always keep on coming back in history, which is also a very sad lesson. No? It comes always in waves, and now we're living this, you know. And so you have your issues here, but I was telling my English friends, well, in Europe, it's, you know, it's not that much better. I mean, I'm still fond of politics in Germany last, you know, couple of years, including how, you know, Angela Merkel behaved in a certain moment of heavy crisis. You know, it was a very liberal and you know, interesting German face, you know, in history. Maybe because, you know, what we've gone through in history in my country, we are at this stage, and then in other European countries, like in Spain, they need more time, you know, because the democracies are quite young. And then, of course, here it's a completely different thing. God, we could talk for years. But it is the truth. And mentioning Goodbye Lenin, that's when I just also said upstairs, it's, I can feel that now. So too many promises were made when, you know, the wall came down and the West really overtook the West overtook the East. So there was no, you know, healthy way of growing together with these two systems that were very unleveled. Many things worked, but many didn't. And when you see the rising right-wing power in Germany, it is mainly coming from the East, because there's frustration, there's despair, there's, you know, no perspective, there's a lot of unemployment, and so it's, again, you know, a wonderful field for all these guys who then, you know, put that fear into the people's heads and tell them that it's actually all very easy, you know, and it's always the you know, it's always the foreigners, there's always, you know, the scapegoats that, you know, they all have, and it's, yeah, it's not great, I have to say, at the moment.
And then let's jump to the hand just in front.
Hi, thanks very much for coming. Inglorious Bastards is absolutely one of my favourite films, and it looks like it would have been really, really fun to be part of. Was it fun to be part of, and kind of what were the best parts of working on it?
It was, and Quentin Tarantino is an absolute lunatic. I mean, he is, but in a good sense. You know? Everything he talks about, everything he thinks about, everything he dreams of is cinema. There's nothing else. And I've never met a director or somebody in that world who is that extreme. And he had some great ideas that nobody else I worked with had. For example, when we were in the preparation process, every Thursday in Berlin, in a studio, in a cinema, he would invite everyone from the crew and actors. Sometimes Brad Pitt showed up with his kids, and, you know, And there was pizza and drinks, and he would show films, original prints sent from his house from LA to Berlin, showing films to everyone as a reference for his own film that he was about to make. So to get everyone into the right mood and to explain what he wants to do. It's a genius idea, you know, to get everyone, you know, be feeling a real, much more part of the whole process of the whole thing, you know, and get excited. And then he loves himself when he talks, of course. So there was also long speeches beforehand, talking about his favorite films, and sometimes it was just odd choice, you know, Western films, you know, Sergio Leone films, or, you know, it was very different genres, but, you know, it made sense when you watch them that, you know, this inspired me to do this film that we're doing. Then he hates mobile phones, so you have to give your mobile phone away on set. He hates when you fall asleep on set because he wants that constant energy. So the technical pauses when they're rearranging the lights and everything, there's always music. I never had this on any other set, so there's David Bowie or Ennio Morricone or whatever. And when he saw someone sleeping, there was a wall of shame, and they took pictures with a device in front of your face that I cannot tell you what it was, because that would maybe be a bit inappropriate, but something that you don't want to have in front of your face. And so there were pictures, even one, as far as I remember, from Mr. Pitt. So in front of everyone. So that made it very clear, you better don't fall asleep. And then he's very old school, so he still shoots on 35 millimeters and not digital. He doesn't have like 90%, 95% of the directors nowadays have these combos and monitors where they see exactly how it's going to look like in the end. And so they're not with you. And back in the days, the director was always standing next to, you know, the actor, watching the actor, and that's what he does. And it's pretty intimidating because he's quite big and loud. Sometimes I thought, like, why is he giggling? Because it will be on, you know, they won't be able to use it. And somehow he managed to, so it wasn't on the sound. These sound guys were, you know, geniuses, because you very often within a take you would hear Tarantino laughing or doing something, and then and what was also interesting, because he always shoots very long, a whole can on you for the whole scene, which you normally don't get. Because you always know, you know, well, he's got the big lines and the chunky bits, so we don't need this part of that actor who's sitting there not saying anything, but he still wants that, you know, and he does it on everyone, which is a big luxury and very expensive because it's on 35. And what was funny is that I understood so much about editing, because you could feel him looking at you when the take was going on, and when he looked away, you thought like, oh shit, he's not looking at me, so that means probably this part I'll be cut out. So you always wanted you wanted to try to get his attention, you know, and to make him look at you. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm talking here, but so very peculiar things that made it so cool to work with him. He's really he's a mastermind.
And then let's come all the way to the front and jump to the hand on the front row.
Hi. I was just wondering, I watched an interview or read an interview with Becker regarding Goodbye Lenin, and he kind of described it as kind of closing the book on the idea of like nostalgia and like looking back at the good, positive aspects of East Berlin and East Germany. And I was wondering if you felt the same way. Do you think it's kind of the end of something and kind of trying to shut that down or like dismiss it? Or would you see it rather as like a reflection and giving a voice to the citizens of East Berlin that kind of look back at that period as something like positive or like appreciate those aspects of it?
Yeah, well, again, it's unfortunately the book is opened up again, and so you know, in my certain neighborhoods. Like I live in East Berlin, and which has become one of the most attractive neighborhoods for Westerners. On Christmas, it's always funny, because on Christmas you only see a few lights, because you know everybody's, you know, in the West. So there's only a few people who are originals, you know, who are from the East. And I have 2 in my house. And when I talk to one of these old ladies, they say, well, now after this long time, after 1990, you know, I'm disappointed, because there was time to, you know, make things better for us from the East. And she said, to be honest, certain aspects were better back then. I haven't lived in the GDR, so I don't know, but it's despite the dictatorship and despite the horrible things with the Stasi, with the secrets, and all these things, you would still find some, maybe more and more people in the East who would say, well, I don't know, at least we had a job, every one of us, and stuff like that. So it's tricky, and I feel that, you know, it will take another 20 years to level it. Because again, I grew up, for 20 years I've been living in Cologne, and still it's a different country to me when I leave Berlin. Berlin has become a very cosmopolitan and very open-minded place, but as soon as you leave Berlin, after, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 kilometers, you are in East Germany, and it's a different place that, you know, where I grew up. So.
And then let's go to the hand, yeah, the lady just there. The lady. You can go next, you can go next.
Hi. You mentioned that you had to put on the uniform a couple of times, or that typically you have to put on the uniform. I was just wondering, as a fellow German, how often is it that you get offers to play a typical German, or let's say a Nazi German, or do you ever have this feeling of being typecast? That would be my question. Thank you.
Where are you from?
Deutschland.
Yeah.
Probably noticed by the accent.
Yeah, that was a big, and it is. It's a big problem for actors, because it goes so fast, and then and it's funny because the last time I talked to actors from different countries, it's funny in which box you are in, so, and it's very funny, you know, because we are, yeah, the goose steppers in the uniform. Then I have a friend from Colombia who always has to play, you know, the narcos, you know, drug dealer guys. I have a friend from Turkey, and who always is the terrorist. It's you know, it made me think of a comedy, and I'm actually having it already in mind to do something with that, because it's funny, and it can happen very quickly. So I was pretty cautious when it came to, you know, playing a Nazi. I did when I felt that it really meant something to me, and I was really interested in the script, but a couple of times I said no to the uniform. And funnily, Goodbye Lenin also in Germany gave me the stamp of being the nicest guy in Germany, which annoyed me big time, because I'm not. And then, you know, and you rather play the villains because it's more fun, you know, than being the nice, you know, son-in-law. They really thought that I would help, you know, elderly people cross the street all the time. And I found myself in situations where I had to sign cucumber glasses in supermarkets, you know, and surreal. And then it was, you know, it was one of the best things that happened professionally in my life, this film, but it also is always a little bit of a curse. And funnily, in Germany, I was always offered these parts, you know. I couldn't bear the description when it was like the nice, the friendly, you know. And then only the outside perspective from someone like Tarantino, who said, yeah, they think you're nice, but actually you're an asshole. And then at the end, and I said like, yeah, finally. And also, the part of Niki Lauda, I'm pretty sure that no German director would have offered me that part. I'm 100% sure. And Ron Howard didn't have these prejudices, you know. And so I could finally play these villains. But it took me a long time.
And then it's with the hand behind.
You've already touched a little bit, certainly, on the movie Rush and the difficulties in trying to work with and accurately convey Niki Lauda, certainly versus the very different foil of James Hunt and Chris Hemsworth. And in my opinion, part of what made that movie work so successfully is your ability to convey that absolute antithesis between the two characters. So I thought I'd ask you along those lines, where do you draw the boundaries of artistic license between a historical character who's perhaps passed away or a distant historical figure in the case of someone like Niki Lauda, who is currently living, versus an outright fictional character, and again, where you draw the lines of artistic boundary between them?
It both can be equally attractive and demanding. Because when it's fictional, there's much more you have to build and construct. It can be very good to have that rich fundament of a real character where you can make so much research and stuff to hold on to. But on the other hand, it also can be a corset, because on the one hand, you don't want to be like a parrot and an imitator of someone. You want to add your own, your own approach and your own thoughts. But if a character is as rich and interesting as a human being, like Niki Lauda is one of the most fascinating human beings I've ever met, and who teaches you something also about one of the big subjects with him was always fear, how to overcome fear, because I would say that I'm quite a fearful person, and we constantly also as actors have to keep that, fight that beast of fear, because you cannot work with our fear. But and someone who has overcome the most incredible things in life, not only with his crash, but the plane accidents, all these things. It is remarkable what he has gone through, and also the sense of humor he has in living his life, with all the damages. And him being, disfigured by the accident. That was all incredible, and then you feel that you just have to play a part like this if it is given to you. And at the beginning, I really didn't know how. So the fear of failing was huge. Up until the first week of shooting. And of course, Chris Hemsworth always, digged and said like, hey, you seem nervous. So we had this thing also going on with you. And then, I don't know if that was a real accurate answer to your question, but and it's always refreshing to, after doing something specific or very demanding, it's always good to do something completely different. Again, to show people different sides of you, but also for yourself, So I wouldn't have played Boris Becker after Niki Lauda. That's a stupid example, but So I needed to do something completely different, and then,
Yeah, let's turn to the hand in the second row.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, that I watched Goodbye Lenin as a bachelor student of German studies back in India, and that was my first German film. And vielen Dank dafür.
Gerne.
And now fortunately I work on German films on the subject of India in 1920s, which were made in 1920s in my PhD. And I see that there was a lot of interest in India in German cinema during that time.
Yeah.
And when I was in Germany, I saw that German cinema halls got fully booked when Shah Rukh Khan films were released. So there's still a kind of German interest in India, which still lingers on. And a couple of years ago, there was also launched a a channel, a full channel, which is G1, and which broadcast all the Indian films and serials in German.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because we already talked about Austrian film, German film, Hollywood film, so I thought this is my personal curiosity that I wanted to ask you that if you also watch some Indian films, or are you also interested in Indian cinema in any way?
Oh God, now you got me. No, because I have to be honest that I know way too little about Indian cinema. Unfortunately, that's the case, and I know how big the industry is, you know, and giant. But I'm pretty ignorant, I have to say. And I mean, yeah, Sandokan. I mean, of course, I've seen some, but where I grew up, there was not that much offer, I have to say, for Indians. In Cologne, where I grew up, there were certain cinemas. The ones that I went to, it was always French, English, and if it was from the Far East, it was Japanese, Chinese sometimes, you know, but not that much Indian cinema. It's a shame, but I'll be working on it. I will write down some recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah, bleib bestimmt the hand just across the aisle.
Schön, dass du hier bist. Danke.
Oh, danke schön.
Looking to the future, who would you consider to be the most promising up-and-coming actor in German cinema or television?
There's many, unfortunately. No, it's funny because at a certain age, I mean, I'm 40 now, so there was really that time when I thought like, oh shit, now I'm becoming older. It says, who are all those young, talented kids? There's one who's called Louis Hoffmann, who's very good. Also because many things have happened in Germany. There's all of a sudden there's good TV, which didn't exist, you know. There's Babylon Berlin. I know the guys who make it, and I know most of the actors in it. And there's some Volker Bruch. He's not that young, but he's a good one, great one. But Louis Hoffmann would be my first choice. Internationally, I'm blown away by this. Probably all of you too. This Timothée Chalamet, who for me is really a freak of nature. I mean, he's incredibly good. I haven't seen something like that in a long time. I think he will have a great and long career. But if you can check out like Babylon Berlin or Das Boot, it's also pretty good. Not easy to make a remake of this film, and then yeah, but Louis Hoffmann. Let's
jump to the hand just behind.
What kind of feelings do you have when one of your movies premieres? Like, do you feel really scared when people see your movie for the first time? Excited on what you've been working on? Yeah.
Yeah, excited. Both. Most often, it's quite dreadful because I cannot stand my face when I watch it, and I cannot stand my voice either. So it's and what you do, because we're all narcissistic idiots. It's just the first time you watch a movie, you just see yourself. You're not even aware of what's going on. So I have to watch a film 3 times, and the third time is the best one, because then I really watch the movie. And I'm not so concerned about my nose or my stupid accent or whatever it is. And then I haven't watched any film more than 3 times, because then I'm not interested anymore. I cannot. I don't know. Maybe when I'm 80, in front of a chimney, and then let's watch Goodbye Lenin again. But I don't. No. So far, I don't.
Yeah, let's jump to the hand in the middle. You, sir. Yeah.
Hola, mi amigo.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Uy,
back
qué bueno.
to the topic of Rush. Did you like Formula One before having a massive part in the movie, or no? Did you start liking it after?
It sounds horrible, but I started to lose interest when Schumacher was winning back to back to back to back. And it became more, like many sports, became more, what's the word? I don't know, sterile or predictable and perfect. You know, it's just, you know, the times when I was so blown away by the Senna documentary, and you know these rivalries that also that he had with Prost, and then you know the 70s. But it happens to me with many sports. I'm also annoyed by many things that happen in soccer, and I'm a huge Barcelona fan. Ooh, probably the only one here. Everybody's leaving. And so many things that happen in soccer nowadays, you know, just disappoint me, I have to say. And in Formula One, that for me, that happened. And Michael Schumacher is one of the greatest, you know, drivers. You know, and it's horrible what happened to him and all that. But I clearly remember these times when I thought like, oh no, not again. I mean, then I just lost interest a bit. Yeah. Then
Yes, you go for it.
Thank you for your talk. I was just wondering what you would say is your own personal favourite film of all time and why.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh wow. This. It might be, you know, it might be an Italian film from the. I don't know. Was it '56 or something? It's called Rocco and His Brothers, by Visconti, and it's. Part of the reason is that, you know, when I was 15, I'm that old that I got a VHS player. Maybe some of you don't know what that is, but I was very proud when I finally got my own VHS player. And I could go to the local, you know, film club, and they rented, you know, VHS tapes out. And then I was a bit influenced by my father's taste, because he was a documentary filmmaker and director, and he recommended me some stuff, and I thought like, oh, these old films. No, I want to watch Reservoir Dogs, and of course I enjoyed these films a lot, but there was some magic about these very cool films in the '60s, French, Italian, that made me want to become a film actor. And when I watched this film, I wanted to be as cool as Alain Delon. Didn't work. I tried it in front of the mirror, but you know. But it wanted me to do this. It's something about the emotional impact of the film, the degree of authenticity. The interesting structure, because it's different. It's told in chapters, so each brother gets its own chapter. The complexity in which, you know, the life of this poor family from the south coming to Milan, it was shown, the way it was filmed and shot, just mesmerized me, and I found it very, very cool. Also Breathless with Belmondo. Also this I tried a lot in front of the mirror, but you know, didn't work out either. And Marcello Mastroianni is my favorite actor of all times. All the Fellini films. And then it, you know, now then if you start thinking, it would be a list of, I don't know, 50 or 100 films that I would like to have if I was on an island. But Rocco and His Brothers would be my choice right now.
So I think we've got time for a couple more questions. So yeah, let's jump to the hands over there.
Hi, encantado. As a PGCE student who does modern languages, I'm just curious as to see what you think, how we can sort of increase exposure to foreign language films in the Anglophone world, because obviously Hollywood and Pinewood in Britain, they're these giants of the industry, but I'm curious as to how you think we can increase in the Anglophone world our exposure to foreign language films.
What is very interesting right now, what's happening with these guys called Netflix, that's really a revolution in our industry, and and some of the things they do are pretty impressive. Nobody else would finance a film nowadays like Roma. Nobody would do. And this is, again, that goes back, that film reminds me of that kind of cinema, that neo-realism cinema of Italy of the 1960s. Nobody would do that nowadays. I was in Marrakesh at the film festival, which was a great experience in December, and Scorsese was there giving a master class, and you could ask him any question. I also asked him what he thinks about Netflix. It's great, because the last film he just did with De Niro and Pacino, nobody wanted to finance. So it was Netflix who do these things and take these risks, and then yeah, people are going to the movies less and less. When it's foreign language involved, it's hard. Surprisingly, again on Netflix, you had these shows that were hugely successful. Like a German show called Dark, for example, was one of their major hits in the US. That never happened before. Casa de Papel, a Spanish series that was a massive hit for them. So, and that I think is an interesting and good thing to see, that there's an interest in producing local content, and having all these different film territories, and still and seeing that it also works abroad, and that this cultural imperialism, which came from, I wouldn't say from England, but from Hollywood, is different. And also when I think of Tarantino, that I remember that many big stars wanted to play these parts, especially the part that Christoph Waltz played. And Christoph Waltz, nobody knew there, But Tarantino had it very clear that he wanted a German actor playing that part, and not a big A-list star in the US. And that I see now more and more happening. So yeah, it increases the importance of foreign language cinema and TV.
So I think we've got time for 2 more questions. So yeah, let's come to the hand in the second row.
We have previously talked before that as a German actor in Hollywood, you sometimes will get the role where you have to wear a uniform. So currently there aren't that many German actors in total in Hollywood. So do you have the impression that maybe in the interaction with other actors, directors, that you're somehow stereotyped as the German guy? So offset in general, how do you deal with that?
Well, from my personal experience, not so much, because again, I said no to a couple of things after Inglorious Bastards, which were all based on, and some of them were not that bad, but it was always Second World War, and it was always, going back to this chapter and playing a certain kind of part. And then I tried to get to something else, and including something like Rush, which gave me the opportunity to show myself to an American audience and an English audience in playing something different. And I don't know what it was then. Woman in Gold was a film that I was then doing. So to avoid being pushed into that Nazi corner and being treated as such, as the typical German actor who plays all the, I just decided to say no a couple of times. But again, in LA, that was that conversation that I was talking about. It was a very fun table with a Colombian, a Turkish, and a German actor. It was hilarious, because that's what you get, and for some it's really difficult to get out of it. It's sometimes also it's funny because just your looks just define you. Is that by itself. It's also a friend of mine who's Italian Turkish-Italian, a guy that I lived together with for a long time. We shared an apartment. He just looks very, Italian and Turkish, but he speaks the best German. He's the smartest guy, and he never gets the part of a German. And that is so frustrating. He's more German than I am. I'm half. He's more German than 100% German, you know. But he just looks like Al Pacino, and so nobody would give him a part which is Horst Schmidt, you know, or Markus Müller. So it's always, you know, it's always a mafia guy, or he's a terrorist. Or so and that can be really frustrating.
And then one final question. Let's go to the hand in the aisle.
Hi. It was just really interesting talking about the film you played, Suffering from Schizophrenia, in the context of having recently watched The Alienist last summer. I just wanted to ask, because it was really fascinating watching the character of Dr. Chrysler develop more throughout the series, revealing perhaps some more of his own internal psyche. What sort of drew you most to doing that role? Because I found it quite fascinating.
Probably one of the main reasons is my wife, because she is a alienist. She's a psychologist, so we've been together for quite some time now, and I was, very fascinated by what she does, because she is specialized in PTSD. So it was a lot about traumas, and and I found it very fascinating when she started talking about it. And then, of course, as an actor, it's a lot about psychology, and I had read, biographies about Freud and Jung and Breuer, and so it always was something that interested me. And in this case, because I was keen in doing a series where you, as an actor, you have that luxury of having a long arc that you can play. I thought this is the guy that I would love to play, because someone who cares for people with mental diseases and traumatized people, and yet being traumatized himself so deeply, and to show that all these vulnerabilities and all these issues for such a long time was very tempting. So I was hoping to play that part, and I'm very happy that we're going back there in April for some more gruesome stuff.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately that's all we've got time for, but please do join with me in thanking Daniel Brühl.